Hello to all my viewers. How was your week? I hope all is going well. Well, I'm here to bring you the 5th episode of What If Naruto Was from the Uchiha clan. Remember that I'll be uploading this fanfic little by little since it's my own creation, and the previous chapters are on my channel. Without further ado, I'll let you enjoy it.
Showtime, Naruto said to himself as he walked through the main entrance of the academy and looked up to see a sign posted up on the wall that pointed the Chunin hopefuls in the right direction. Naruto arched an eyebrow at the rather obvious attempt to help the contestants in the exams, but none the less followed the sign up the steps to the second floor. Whatever Naruto was expecting, it was not a group of people staring at a door where two smug-looking shinobi were standing guard. Naruto stood there at the top step silently as he listened to shinobi from various countries complain about being denied entry. Naruto immediately recognized the two men guarding the room labeled as 301 from the number of times he had passed their booth. Sure, they were transformed into what Naruto assumed was their younger forms, but Naruto knew that as Izumo and Kotetsu, the village's eternal gate guards. Naruto watched as a genin from the leaf tried to force his way in only to be slugged in the jaw and kicked back towards his team, earning cries from the other shinobi who were getting nervous about their prospects of becoming Chunin. Naruto shook his head at the stupidity of the shinobi in front of him. If they could be called so. Are these people this stupid? I mean, it is barely an E-rank genjutsu they placed over the sign above the door. That, and we have only gone up one set of stairs at this point. Naruto thought incredulously as he stared at the protesting genin with a deadpan glare. Trying to save whatever brain cells he had left, Naruto forced his way through the group without saying a word and made it to the stairs to the third floor. Naruto did not spare a second glance to the converging of idiots on the second floor who deserved to be eliminated from this exam. Naruto had just missed a boy with green spandex and his team entering up the stairs he had just come from. Naruto walked up to the door to the real room 301 and slid open the door and took a few steps in letting the door slide shut. A wave of killer intent immediately tried to swallow Naruto up as he walked in alone. The genin in the room thought Naruto as an easy prey to be taken in this exam. However, they had no idea how wrong they could be. Naruto shrugged off the weak killer intent since he had experienced much worse while training with Itachi and Mihawk. Naruto walked over to a table situated on the right side of the room. Naruto turned to his left to see a familiar group of shinobi glancing over at him with small smiles and one with indifference. Naruto recognized them as the blue-haired boy who he fought on the bridge and the fake hunter Nin as well. However, there was one Naruto did not recognize. The shinobi was wearing a black pinstripe dress shirt with a yellow tie, but Naruto could catch a glimpse of chain mesh underneath the guy's collar. The boy had blue hair much like Chojuro's, but also had yellow streaks running across the blue hair. Chojuro bowed slightly, which Naruto thought was weird. Hello again, Shinobi-san, it is nice to see you once again. I am afraid I forgot to get your name the last time we crossed Beyblades. Chojuro informed Naruto with a somewhat regretful tone in his voice since Naruto had provided a wonderful duel. My name is Chojuro, by the way, Chojuro said while extending his hand out for Naruto to take in a handshake. Naruto took the handshake since he respected Chojuro's skills with the sword. Naruto told Chojuro and by proxy the rest of the Kiri genin his name in return. Since Naruto only used his first name, they were blissfully unaware of Naruto's heritage. Naruto watched with slight amusement as Haku slid over to the bench of the table Naruto was sitting at. She kept getting closer but had yet to look at the young man in the eyes, which was only fueling said young man's amusement. Haku glanced to see Chojuro and her other teammate talking, so she turned back to face Naruto with a small smile. I was thinking on what you said on the bridge all that time ago, and I agree, trash like that doesn't deserve to live. I just wanted the chance to tell you that I admire your resolve. Haku tried to blurt out that last sentence as fast as she could. Naruto couldn't help but let out a small chuckle at Haku's nervous behavior around him, which only made the ice-release kunoichi a little self-conscious. Naruto turned to face Haku with a small foxy grin. It is so nice to meet a serious kunoichi. All of the kunoichi around here are more interested in their looks or love life, Naruto stated with a frown and a blank tone with a matching deadpan expression. Haku giggled at Naruto's deadpan expression, drawing the attention of the other two Kiri genin. Naruto just repeated what he said to Haku to the other two, getting chuckles from both Kiri Shinobi, while Naruto wondered why he didn't take the chance and go to Kiri. The boy in dress clothing looked at Naruto with a grin, almost as if he could sense Naruto's strength, or maybe he was just an idiot. "My name is Kakujio." The shinobi known as Kakujio introduced himself with a suave tone. Naruto wondered why he was named after the bishop piece in shogi. Then again, some people thought he was named after a ramen topping. Then something Naruto wasn't expecting happened. Naruto watched as a hand of yellow energy came out of his hand, and then he performed a small salute with the energy or aura hand. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the blatant display of Kakujio's abilities. There are only a few reasons to show your abilities so readily to an enemy shinobi. 1. He is an idiot, or 2. He is extremely cocky in his ability. Judging from the gleam in his eye when he showed the ability, it is the cocky option. What a fool it is, that arrogance that will lead to an early death or the death of those around him. Naruto shot Kakujio a grin of his own, effectively masking what he was thinking about the Kiri shinobi. Naruto continued to have a pleasant conversation with Team from Kiri as the rest of the Konoha rookies made their presence known in the testing room. Team 7 had just entered the testing room and were greeted by the same treatment Naruto was greeted with about 10 minutes prior. As the wave of killer intent washed over them, Naomi and Narumi showed their discomfort by clenching their hands. Sasuke felt his heartbeat pick up, and Sakura tried to shield herself from the malicious intent by using Sasuke's body as a buffer. The tension was becoming too much for the Leaf Genin team and left them wishing for any kind of disturbance in the unrelenting killer intent of multiple Genin teams. Thankfully, someone was feeling kind today and gave them their much-needed distraction. "Sasuke-kun." Sasuke groaned, hearing the familiar shout from one of his most loyal fangirls, and as if on cue felt an extra weight on his left side. Praying silently for something else, Sasuke turned his gaze to the left slightly, where blonde hair filled his vision. It looks like Sasuke was not having as much luck as he would like. The room watched as Ino snuggled into the Uchiha side with growing sweat drops on the back of their heads, wondering how she became a kunoichi. A certain pinkette had a large twitch on her brow ridge as she watched the Yamanaka heiress cozy up with her Sasuke. "Ino, pig!" Sakura shouted at her rival and used her abnormal natural strength to pry Ino off of Sasuke like a leech. The two Leaf Kunoichi, which was a stretch, were grinding their foreheads against the others and were shooting looks that could kill if such a thing was possible. Sasuke, who was hiding his embarrassment well, slid away from the fangirls. The room grew a second sweat drop and wondered if all Konoha Kunoichi were fangirls. While all of this was happening, one Leaf Kunoichi with a hairstyle resembling a panda was looking away in embarrassment. Haku was nodding now, understanding completely what Naruto was telling her earlier. "Troublesome. It looks like you guys got roped into competing in these exams as well," Shikamaru said lazily as he and Choji, who was eating from a bag of chips, joined Team 7 and their teammate. Narumi and Naomi let out a small sigh, seeing how even in one of the most important events in the world Shikamaru showed no enthusiasm. "You know, Shikamaru, I think that you might actually die if you were to show some enthusiasm," Narumi said with a small smirk, earning a snicker from her sister and a roll of the eyes from said Nara. Narumi, though, did get a slight twitch when she heard Shikamaru mutter out something about troublesome blondes. "Hey, it looks like you guys are taking the exams too. Not like you are going to win, right, Akamaru?" Kiba said, nearly shouted in his usual brash style of doing things, earning a small yelp from his canine partner. Shino and Hinata walked up behind him at a much more subdued and quiet manner. Sasuke managed to distance himself from his arguing fangirls and smirked at the Inuzuka heir. "Of course we are, like I would miss a chance to beat shinobi from all over the continent, dog breath. I will also be winning this whole thing. You don't stand a chance against an Uchiha mutt," Sasuke challenged, arrogantly, serving to irritate the young Inuzuka, who wanted nothing more than to wipe away the Uchiha's signature smirk. Kiba clenched his hands around the wrists of his sweater as he restrained himself from attacking the Uchiha heir, who had just insulted his pride. Hinata looked at her teammate with concern, since she never really liked conflict, especially when it was between comrades. "Shino was just Shino. Watch it, Sasuke. It won't be like it was back in the academy, and even then you could just barely beat me. I have gotten better, and your pretty little eyes just emerged, meaning you still suck," Kiba retorted with a smirk of his own as he pointed out the simple fact that Sasuke had just activated his Sharingan. Back in their academy days, Kiba was the only one who was able to challenge the Uchiha when it came down to taijutsu practice. Sasuke glared at Kiba, letting his single Tomo Sharingan roar to life, earning a growl from the feral like shinobi. You know, being so loud usually puts a large target on your backs. That is something that is not recommended for anyone, but especially not for rookies. Oh, and I am Kabuto, by the way. The rookie genin all quieted down and looked over to see a boy with glasses and silver walking towards their little group. Taking heed to his word, the group of unaware genin took a look around and saw a number of shady-looking genin all glaring at their group. Hinata let out an eep and hid behind Shino, while Ino and Sakura, who had just stopped arguing, swallowed lumps forming in their throat. Sasuke shot them a glare right back, and the other genin just looked around the room. Let them glare all they want, me and Akamaru are going to win this whole thing, so it doesn't matter. Isn't that right, boy? Kiba shouted, obviously not bothered by being the center of the attention that others would avoid. Akamaru barked, supporting his master like any loyal shinobi dog would. Kabuto looked at Kiba like he was the stupidest person to ever walk the elemental continent its entirety. Kiba just ignored the look, as he was too busy picturing his grand victory in the middle of an arena, surrounded by a number of fangirls screaming his name. Kabuto shook his head and turned to face the other shinobi in the group. Take it from someone who has taken these tests 7 times. These exams aren't easy. These even more so since all of the major hidden villages are competing. Kabuto warned them, sternly, getting nods from the genin. Except from Shikamaru, who narrowed his eyes, feeling like something was off about the silver-haired genin. Sasuke, on the other hand, scoffed at the elder leaf genin's warning, since he had another opinion on the failure in front of him. They probably aren't that hard. You just suck, Sasuke stated with an infuriating smirk on his lips and his arms crossed over his blue clan shirt. Kabuto, who had previously been smiling, frowned at the naive Uchiha. No, these exams are very difficult, but you'll soon learn that. Some of you the hard way. Kabuto finished that last part in an inaudible whisper, shooting a menacing smile towards the group's Uchiha. Taking the exams as many times as I have has allowed me to gain information on this year's competitors, which is quite handy really, Kabuto stated for the group to hear as he pulled out a deck of cards that were blank. Now Shikamaru was really curious about this leaf genin who he had never seen before and who had information on all of the competitors. There was just something that even he couldn't figure out. Information? Sasuke questioned, raising an eyebrow with a mild curiosity directed at Kabuto's deck of ninja information cards. Once he was informed that it was information on his fellow competitors, Sasuke let a grin cross his face, believing he could get some advantages on a few people in the tests. Okay, then show me Rock Lee's and Gaara Sabaku's cards, Sasuke stated, remembering how Gaara managed to evade his senses and how Rock Lee beat him handily. Not that he'd admit that. Kabuto smiled, since the plan was going along perfectly, and nodded his head before he began to shuffle the cards. Placing a blank card on the floor, Kabuto put his middle and pointer fingers on the card and released a small pulse of chakra onto the surface of the card. The card spun slowly until the information on Rock Lee came to the surface of the card. Rock Lee has no capabilities in Nin or Genjutsu due to a disease that has ruined his chakra coils. His taijutsu, though, is at the point where he could match a number of jounin. Part of Konoha's Team 9, consisting of himself, Niji Hyuga, and Tenten, with his sensei being Meito Gai. Team 9 has done 42 D rank and 35 C rank missions. Kabuto read the card, allowing the genin to absorb the information before returning the card to his deck and shuffling. Kabuto pulled out a new card and channeled his chakra into that card, as well revealing the picture and information on Gaara Sabaku. I don't have that much information on him, to be honest, but I can tell you that he, along with his teammates and siblings Temari and Kankuro, have completed 12 D rank, 52 C rank, and 1 B rank mission. The most shocking thing, however, is that he has never suffered an injury while in the field. Kabuto finished with a small trickle of sweat going down his brow. The Konoha genin all gawked at that information, since they would get small cuts just from D rank missions. Shikamaru, who had been looking around the room for a certain raven-haired shinobi, found his gaze and gave him a small smirk. Naruto, who knew what he was about to do, just shrugged his shoulders indifferently to the idea. As troublesome as it is, can you give me information on Naruto? Shikamaru asked politely, remembering to avoid using Naruto's surname, effectively avoiding his wraith. Kabuto raised an eyebrow, confused as to why he didn't use the surname but searched through his deck. Narumi and Naomi glared at the shadow user for asking for information on their brother. Kabuto pulled out a card with Naruto's information on it. Here it is. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki. Kabuto froze, reading the full name of the shinobi requested, getting everyone in the room to go silent and look at Naruto, who was sitting there with his eyes closed at a table by himself. Shaking out of his surprise, Kabuto continued on reading. Naruto is the only son of the 4th Hokage and has part of his early life labeled as classified. He has shown no taijutsu but is always seen with a katana on his person. That being said, his kenjutsu skills are truly off the charts and he is said to use a style never seen before. Naruto and shown no abilities in nin or genjutsu. He rotates teams when going on missions of C rank or above. Naruto has completed 28 D rank, 16 C rank, 1 B rank and 1 A rank mission. Kabuto almost choked on his own saliva as he read out the last part on the card. Naruto has also only received light cuts during his missions. Nothing serious. Kabuto relayed to the silent room, who were all staring at Naruto like he was an extraterrestrial. Naruto sat there unmoving, completely relaxed, as he let Kabuto reveal him to the room of Chunin hopefuls. All of that information is accessible in the records of Konoha. He has either planted a target on me or convinced a few teams to avoid me. Plus, he has given them expectations of my skill set, which I can shatter if need be. Thanks, Shikamaru, you just made my job a lot easier. Naruto sat there with no discernible emotion on his face but was inwardly grinning, much like a fox that had caught its prey. The Leaf Shinobi all stared at Naruto in shock, but in Narumi and Naomi's case, admiration and awe. The Kiri team, who was closest to the only son of the Hokage, all looked at him with respect and slight awe. Chojuro could personally attest to Naruto's skill with his sword, since he had not had a duel like that since his training back in Kiri. Haku, who was surprised that Naruto had shown no skills in the nin or genjutsu fields, had a sneaking suspicion Naruto was using a shinobi's most powerful tool, deception. Kakujio's grin threatened to split his face in two as he thought of what a great fight Naruto could provide him with, never once entertaining the thought that his earlier display would come back and haunt him. The team from Cloud also heard Kabuto's very thin rundown on Naruto's skills and mission history and was generally impressed. Omoi had already started to create a very elaborate but dreadful scenario where he accidentally slaughtered the son of the Yondaime Hokage, leading to the destruction of the ninja system. Karui scoffed, believing she could handle the Prince of Konoha easily with her sword, still bitter from Naruto embarrassing her over a week ago. Samui was thinking about talking to the raven-haired shinobi, since he seemed to be pretty cool, not to mention he had the aura of a confident warrior. Yujito, though, was not as lucky to have her thoughts in private thanks to a certain perverted feline that was sharing her body with her. Did you hear that kitten? He hasn't even been seriously injured yet. You need to claim him before some other woman sinks her claws into him. The Nibi purred, her memory still thinking about that dominating presence that Naruto produced. It was an aura that demanded you respect his power or there would be consequences, which was rare for a genin to hold. Yujito cut the mental link with the two tails in favor of staring at the shinobi, who was now the center of attention. I don't know if it is because he holds the kyubi, but he just feels so familiar. Like we have been friends for years. A plume of smoke suddenly erupted behind the podium in the center of the room, drawing everyone's attention. Out of the smoke came a man with tanned skin and one scar running down each of his cheeks at an angle. He was wearing a black trench coat and his leaf headband like a bandana. All right, maggots, quiet down and follow me. This was the proctor for the first exam, Ibiki Marino, a renowned interrogator and head of the Hidden Leafs Torture and Interrogation Unit. Ibiki led the participants into another room similar to the fist, but with packets of papers on each seat. Ibiki took his position at the front of the room so he could see everything. Find the packet that has your name and shinobi license number on it and sit down. Ibiki ordered of his newest victims, watching some of them scurry around in a panic while others calmly found where they were to be seated. A chunin is something much more than a genin. As a chunin, you may find yourself leading missions where it is your role to look at everything and make swift decisions. It is up to you to be swift but correct. Some of these missions will have limits on time where you cannot just take your time and go through it a measured pace. No, some missions you can find a comrade or an informant captured and then time will be of the essence. If you are too slow, then you will lose that teammate. This is what we will be simulating here. You have 100 questions there and an hour to answer them by any means. Ibiki smirked at the look of disbelief on most of the genins' faces, believing their task was an impossible one. Oh, and one more thing, if you fail you will never be able to take the exams again and will be an eternal genin. On cue there were cries of protest and the questioning of his authority to do so. I can assure you that each of your senseis accepted the terms of the test when they signed you up for the exam. Now if anyone wishes to leave before the test begins they can try again next year. But if one person leaves, then their team will join them as well. Ibiki watched with an indifferent expression as the room fell deathly quiet. The genin were all looking towards their teammates for some form of silent guidance. Ibiki waited 5 minutes, and in that time 10 teams had left the testing room. Begin! As soon as the word begin left Ibiki's lips, the sound of pencils hitting paper echoed in the silent room, much to the hidden amusement of the proctor. Naruto let his eyes fall on to the piece of paper he was given. Flipping the first page over, Naruto was tempted to immediately start answering questions but decided to tackle the test calmly. Remember to always read the details before rushing in. Patience will save your life many more times than any ninjutsu. Itachi's words echoed in Naruto's mind, calming down all of his apprehension towards what he was being asked. Naruto went over the directive. Directive: you have an hour to complete this portion of the exam. There are 100 questions on this exam. You are to read over each and every question before starting to answer any questions. Once you have done so, then you may begin your exam. Naruto made sure to read over the directive twice more, since all of the pencils hitting the paper over and over again were having a minor effect on him. Naruto calmly read over each and every question just like the directive told him to do. When Naruto got to the final question, he arched an eyebrow and did what the question asked. Turning to the back of the cover page, which he assumed was blank, he channeled some chakra into the paper and watched as a single-line message appeared. Naruto read over the message with a blank expression and looked over to Ibiki, who was just looking down at some papers. Naruto quietly rose from his chair, making sure not to draw too much attention and possibly help the competition. Naruto was aware of a few pairs or eyes on him, and the most notable of them were the eyes of Ibiki. Naruto stared at the man for a few moments before letting a small smirk come to his lips, a smirk mirrored by the proctor. Quietly shuffling over to a door where there was another proctor standing. The proctor asked him for the message, which Naruto knew was the message on the back of his paper. The leaf that lies in the sun also lies in the shadows. The proctor nodded his head and opened the door he was standing in front, motioning for Naruto to follow him into a smaller waiting and rest room. Naruto took a seat and the proctor went back to take his original position, leaving Naruto to his thoughts. I was the first one done, I see. Ibiki created a high amount of tension in explaining the duties expected of a chunin. Then to add on to that, he created a false illusion of being an eternal genin to force them to rush through the test, thus making them forget what he said about looking at everything. Then there is the purpose of separating those who succeed from the common testing area. This way the others are sure if I figured it out or if I couldn't take it and just quit. Also, there is no odd chance that someone says something that will reinforce the belief of the other testers. Naruto watched as a team from Kumo he had not met walk by him, no doubt also figuring out the purpose. Seeing a team joining him in the waiting room also brought another point into Naruto's thoughts. Then there is the challenge of conveying the meaning of the test to your other teammates without alerting Ibiki or the other competitors. Naruto waited for the rest of the hour as the room filled up with other teams who either solved the puzzle or stumbled upon the answer by dumb luck. Naruto saw among the teams were the Leaf Rookies along with Team 9, the teams from Kumo, Kiri, Suna, and IWA were also amongst the group who had passed the first stage. Naruto was glad that from his seated position he was hidden from view of everyone minus Shikamaru, who someone found him and decided to take a nap next to him. The lazy bastard knows I would help out if someone tried to attack him, Naruto thought with a ghost of a smile on his usually stoic face. It was at the 55-minute mark that the window on the other side of the room shattered, putting all the genin on high alert. Well, all of them except Naruto and Shikamaru for different reasons. A moment later, a kunoichi with violet hair and wearing a tan overcoat over a chain mesh. Her choice of clothing made many kunoichi glare at her, and other shinobi, such as Kiba and Kankuro, stare at her with a perverted grin. Behind her was a banner that read, "The sexy and single Anko Mitarashi, proctor of the second stage." Anko looked around at the number of genin still left and clicker her teeth. Looks like Ibiki is getting soft if he let this many brats get past his test. Oh well, I will have this number halved at least. Anko muttered to herself with a sadistic smile that made some of the lesser genin feel slightly uncomfortable. Alright brats, you have 10 minutes to meet me at training ground 44. If you aren't there, you will be disqualified. Naruto turned to look at the sleeping Nara and nudged him in the shoulder, stirring him. After relaying the message, Naruto performed a shunshin to follow after the snake woman. He knew just where to find training ground 44, as did a majority of the leaf shinobi. Naruto and the rest of the genin stood in a crowd in front of a gated-off forest, all with different expressions on their faces. A loud growl came from somewhere deep in the forest that made a few of the genin take a step back in fear. At the front of the group, Anko watched as the final few seconds ticked away. Snapping the watch closed, Anko turned to face the group. Alright, that's time. Hello my little genin, and welcome to my second home, training ground 44, or better known around here as the Forest of Death. Anko projected her voice to make sure that all of the genin could hear her words. As soon as her little introduction ended, there was a shrill shriek coming from the forest, as if it wanted to introduce itself to the little genin. This, of course, in scaring some of the genin to the point where a few thought their heart would pound right through their chest. Anko was smiling at their fear until she saw Naruto looking on unimpressed. Anko took out a kunai from her overcoat and tossed it with decent speed at Naruto, who decided if he should let it hit him. Naruto ultimately decided against it and leaned to his right slightly so that the kunai would miss him completely. Anko, who had already performed a shunshin to get behind the raven-haired shinobi, had to use another kunai to hold it at Naruto's throat. The other genin, who were too distracted by the threat of the forest, were looking at the proctor, who looked like she was about to kill Naruto. Does my home not meet your expectations? Anko whispered into Naruto's ear only so he could hear her words. To have some fun with the cool and calm genin, Anko pressed her assets against Naruto's back, her kunai inches from cutting into his skin. Naruto simply arched an eyebrow at Anko's rather blunt actions. The female genin were glaring at Anko for her rather unladylike behavior, while the male portion of the crowd glared at Naruto with jealousy. However, Naruto and Anko ignored them in favor of continuing the little game they were playing. Yes, I do not believe the forest is all that threatening after all. I was about 5 when I spent a few months in there. Naruto replied in a calm whisper of his own, not even bothered by Anko pressing into his back. Anko thought on his words for a few moments before she recognized the genin she was trying to tease. Glancing at Naruto from over his shoulder, Anko had to admit that the boy from all those years ago filled out rather nicely, to the point where she wouldn't mind having some fun with him. A shiver ran down Konoha's snake mistress' spine, not thinking about the possible intimate time, but because she suddenly felt cold steel against her inner thigh. Anko knew from its positioning that it was against a major artery that could kill her rather quickly. The brat is pretty good and he's level-headed. He's gonna make Chunin easily. Anko was removed from her thoughts when her danger senses went off. Letting go of Naruto, she turned around to face the person who get behind her. It was Kusanine, who had come up behind the two with the kunai Anko had thrown earlier in hand. The Kusa Kunoichi gave Anko a very disturbing smile and handed the proctor of the second stage. I was just returning your kunai, Proctor-san. The Kusanine said politely before returning to stand next to her teammates. Anko and Naruto let their vision linger on the shinobi who had managed to get so close to them with a suspicious glimmer in their eyes. Anko put away both of her kunai and returned back to the front of the group to carry out the rest of her duties as the proctor. Listen up, because I will only be saying this once. To finish this stage, you need to recover 2 scrolls. One labeled as Heaven and the other Earth. Anko pulled out one of each scrolls to show the teams an example. You are not allowed to open up these scrolls until you reach the tower in the center of the forest, where you will need to bring the scrolls. The teams from Konoha and Kumo with 4 members will need to gather 2 of each scroll because of the extra member. Anko pocketed the scrolls and pointed over to a booth with a Chunin sitting there with a stack of papers. To get your scroll and gate number, you will need to sign a waiver that relieves Konoha of any responsibility for your probable death in the forest. This got a number of unhappy grumbles from the genin, who were basically called future corpses by a nonchalant Anko. Naruto strolled over to the booth and signed his waiver and was given an earth scroll as well as his gate. Number 12. Naruto stood there by himself, aware of the eyes that were on him from the Amigekure team to his right and a different Kiri squad on his left. Naruto heard Anko's voice come over a speaker system wishing the genin luck, which made Naruto snort, since he knew that those words were far from sincere. There was a loud buzzer that went off and simultaneously each and every gate opened up. Naruto took off towards where he knew the tower to be from his childhood, not bothering to look for a team because he knew a team would come looking for him, the lone wolf in the competition. It had been about an hour, close to 2, when Naruto sensed someone was following him thanks to a Kage Bunshin that had dispelled itself. Naruto dropped down to the forest floor that was littered with a number of thick trees and shrubbery. It was not even a minute later when Naruto found himself with company on the forest floor. Naruto's side, of course, it had to be an IWA team. Each of the IWA shinobi were glaring at the scorned son of the Hokage with an obvious hatred filling their eyes, blinding them to the truth. The truth being Naruto was not his father and should not be judged for Minato's actions during a war. Who Naruto guessed was the leader stepped forward with an arrogant grin on his face. Look, it's the son of that damned yellow flash. He killed my father, and now I will be able to get my revenge by killing his son. I bet you wish you had a team now, bastard, just so you could run from my revenge. The teen shouted with a bloodthirsty grin. A grin that both of his teammates were sporting on their own faces. Naruto sighed and shook his head at the ignorant fools in front of him that would rather kill him for the Hokage's sins than try and be diplomatic about the situation. Then again, to the untrained eye, Naruto would not appear to be any place to negotiate with a full team of shinobi. Naruto decided not to stain twilight with the blood of the trash in front of him and would stick to his taijutsu. Naruto usually did not rely on taijutsu since a sword was so much more efficient in killing or dispatching opponents, but the raven-haired shinobi thought this would be a good chance to sharpen his skills. Naruto spread his legs out, widening his base, and let his arms hang at his sides, giving the impression that he had an opening. This was the essence of the Koto Hoku style that would encourage an opponent to rush in, where Naruto would use sudden movements to deliver punishing but quick strikes before moving again. Earth Release. Stone Gauntlets. The lead shinobi slammed his fists into the ground and slowly retracted them from the ground with a grin. The shinobi fell back into a boxer's stance before rushing forward to close the distance between he and the son of Iwa's greatest enemy. Naruto bobbed and weaved away from a handful of jabs that were aimed at his skull. Naruto glanced behind his shoulder and spun on his heel and gripped the sides of the stone spear that another of the IWA shinobi had tried to stab him with. Naruto used the strength he had gained in his upper arms alone to throw one of the IWA shinobi at the other. The IWA shinobi ducked under his incoming teammate and closed in on Naruto before Naruto could react effectively. Bring back his stone glove, the IWA nin threw a straight punch that Naruto could not block in time. Naruto was taken back behind the strength in the punch and therefore was not prepared to be launched into the tree line back first. The IWA shinobi team waited for Naruto to get back to his feet before continuing the beatdown. Naruto, who was pulling himself from the crushed trunk of the tree he crashed through, started to evaluate himself. Looks like I need to up my speed a bit before I will be ready to face a group of shinobi on my own. Naruto crossed his fingers and created a Kage Bunshin, giving it silent orders to get the enemy's attention, which it went to do without hesitation. Naruto's Kage Bunshin jumped out of the forestry behind the IWA shinobi, who had yet to attack, and kicked him towards the two more eager shinobi. The other IWA shinobi whirled around to face Naruto, but the clone had already vanished back into the trees. Naruto, or his clone, fell for a tree above the IWA team, landing between the three and making them scatter in opposite directions. Something Naruto planned on happening from the beginning. Naruto had the clone lunge at the two shinobi who were closest together, and had the clone detonate itself with the great clone explosion, creating a cloud of dust and debris that filled the forest floor. The real Naruto slipped behind the one IWA shinobi, who he had kicked earlier, and pulled him into the forest line after deliver a knife strike to the back of his neck, rendering him unconscious. That is one down. 2 more to go. The temporary smoke screen cleared and the two stone-wielding shinobi looked around a little more wearily, since they could not find their other teammate in the immediate area. Naruto came back out and revealed himself to the two shinobi from Iwagakure, getting them to tense up and rearm themselves with their stone weaponry. The shinobi with the stone spear charged forward and tried to impale Naruto, who slid to the side so Naruto could pin the spear to his side, allowing Naruto to deliver a backhand to the IWA shinobi hard enough to get him to release the spear of stone and tumble away. The shinobi with rock gloves engaged Naruto again, throwing a mix of jabs, and hooks at Naruto's head, who was manipulating the spear to fend off the teen's hands. The IWA shinobi struck the spear in the perfect spot, which caused the spear to snap in half, leaving Naruto holding the two ends. Naruto took a moment and adjusted his grip so that he was holding the jagged ends of the former spear like daggers. The exchange began anew, with the IWA shinobi continued throwing jabs as he bounced on the heels of his feet. Naruto used the spears to stab the IWA shinobi's knuckles, slowly chipping away the nin's rock gauntlets. The IWA nin winced in pain and, with a small, determined cry, threw a powerful hook to Naruto's jaw that turned his head from the impact, making Naruto spit out some blood. Shaking his head slightly to gather his bearings, Naruto examined the ends of the spear and saw that they were dulled from colliding with the nin's stone-coated hands. Now, with a pair of clubs, Naruto weaved through a series of body strikes, finally seeing the pattern behind the Iwagakure Genin's attacks, making them easier to avoid. Naruto bashed the clubs on the teen's shoulders, making the boy cry out in pain, and tried to react with a second, wide hook. Predicting the rather generic movement, Naruto was able to block the blow with one of the stone clubs. Knee lifting the shinobi in the gut, forcing him to lurch forward, Naruto dropped the club and hit the shinobi with an uppercut, taking him into the air. The shinobi Naruto backhanded away got back to his feet and glared at Naruto's back while going through a series of hand signs. Earth release. Rising impalement. A row of spikes shot from the earth below, starting at the shinobi's feet and continuing onward towards Naruto's unprotected back. Naruto quickly gathered the necessary amount of chakra and performed a quick substitution with the IWA nin he had sent up into the air. The shinobi had no idea what happened. One moment he felt himself reach the apex of the flight, and then the next he felt a wet, warm sensation where his heart was. The teammate who was holding the spear had a look of terror plastered on his face when he realized it was his teammate at the end of his spear instead of Naruto. Naruto, who had took the IWA shinobi's position in the air, landed on his feet, looking at the last of the remaining shinobi with the same blank look. Naruto had utilized a substitution with another person, a tactic not normally used due to the large amount of chakra it takes. To change places with the target, a shinobi would need to have more chakra than her target, as well as be able to temporarily control the chakra to initiate the position change. The IWA shinobi's eyes started to fade before he fell forward on the ground dead, leaving a traumatized backstabber to stare at his handiwork. Naruto slowly walked around the IWA shinobi, who was only staring at his one-time best friend with tears streaming down his face in a state of disbelief. Running his hand over one of the crimson magatama on his gray zip-up vest, Naruto was rewarded with a kunai. Naruto thrusted the black steel right through the shocked teen's back, right through the heart, effectively ending his life. Naruto watched on stoically as the boy's body fell in line with the other body lying there. Naruto, remembering the purpose of this test, scavenged through the pouches both shinobi had on their person in search for the scrolls necessary to pass the test. He found what he was looking for in the second boy's shuriken pouch. Apparently they had both of the scrolls and only needed to get to the tower. Yet they let their ignorance get in the way and decided to try and avenge those who have died in war. Though I must thank them for showing me how much I need to work on my taijutsu. Naruto pocketed both scrolls just in case he needed them for negotiating or just so he could keep another team out of the next round. Taking a moment's rest before heading off towards the tower, Naruto caught something out of the corner of his eye. The leaves above his head were rustling, and that was when a giant spider fell down, trying to devour Naruto head first. Acting quickly, Naruto used twilight to bisect the arachnid, watching as it shrieked and its legs curled before dying. Naruto sighed as he flicked off the creature's green blood. It was just one of those days. Elsewhere in the forest, Team 8 was having its own troubles with a team from Iwagakure. It was the team that Naruto saw entering the village. The leaf shinobi were panting softly with sweat running down their foreheads. Each and everyone won their clan jutsu, were just not cutting it against the opponents they were matched up against. Hinata rushed forward in her gentle fist stance and delivered a number of debilitating strikes to the much larger IWA shinobi. Akatsuchi, however, just shrugged of the chakra-enhanced strikes thanks to the earth armor he was sporting. Each blow just hit the armor, but the chakra was not able to penetrate the armor the large man was wearing. You are pretty good with your clan jutsu, lady, but you just ran into the wrong opponent today. That happens sometimes. Akatsuchi said more to himself than Hinata while stroking his chin pensively, earning a large sweat drop from the Hyuga princess. Shaking his head, Akatsuchi moved quickly for someone his size and dropped his fist down on Hinata's head. Hinata, using her natural flexibility, managed to leap back at the last moment as Akatsuchi's fist made a small crater in the ground. Akatsuchi looked up with the same dopey smile he always wore that could easily lull an enemy into a false sense of security. I am sorry. I do not wish to harm you, but I can't lose here. I still have much to prove to someone. Hinata said resolutely in one of her rare moments of confidence, her Byakugan active and staring intently at Akatsuchi. The Hyuga heiress quickly closed in on the large man from IWA before stopping in front of him in a stance of the gentle fist. 8 trigrams, 32 palms. Hinata cried out, slamming her palms into the shinobi's chest over and over as she nailed half of the man's tenketsu in hopes of shutting him down for good, but not killing the IWA nin. Akatsuchi's shoulders drooped, making Hinata believe she had won the battle, but she was mistaken because the next moment she was knocked to the ground by a leg sweep. Hinata looked up in confusion, seeing Akatsuchi standing there with that same smile, like as if he had not been touched at all. That was a pretty tough attack there, Hyuga-san. It actually broke through the armor a few times. You are plenty strong, but I think it is time we finish this. Akatsuchi said in a friendly voice as he put his palms into the earth at his feet. Hinata tried to get up but found that her ankle was twisted from the fall. Earth release. Terracotta prison. Hinata watched on helplessly as walls started to rise up all around her in a rectangular formation. There was a loud crash where the walls locked together above her, trapping her in the prison. Hinata felt herself getting weaker and weaker and was left wondering what was happening to her. As if he could read her mind, Akatsuchi's voice came through the walls of the prison. I always get yelled at for explaining things, but if you activate your Byakugan you will see what is happening, so I'll just tell you. The terracotta prison takes the inmate's chakra and uses it to strengthen the walls. Don't worry, I made sure to make the technique end when you go unconscious. Despite her situation, Hinata smiled, since she would not be killed in this dreadful forest. Shino and his bugs too were having difficulty with his opponent from IWA due to her fire that just kept melting before they could hit her. Shino was silently blaming himself for not preparing his hive more extensively for this exam as he watched Kuratsuchi burn down another wave of his beetles. Is that the best you got, bug boy? You better hurry up and step it up or I will end up crushing you. The granddaughter of the Tsuchikage taunted the Aburame, who under his sunglasses had a twitching brow from all of the bug-based insults. Let it be known that normally an Aburame will be logical but truly hate when people refer to them as bugs, and even more so when someone speaks of killing insects. Shino raised his arms where another much larger wave of parasitic insects raced at the IWA Kunoichi. Kuratsuchi, who was too busy laughing at her own puns to avoid the bugs, was soon encased in the chakra eaters. Just when Shino thought his victory was assured, his insects scattered, revealing a log used as a substitution to avoid being a beetle meal. Kuratsuchi appeared behind the bug user and kicked him in the spine, sending him sliding towards her original position. Hey! You just irritated me, beetle boy. Now I am going to burn you until you are a pile of ashes. Kuratsuchi said confidently while pointing a finger at the calm Aburame. Shino said nothing and continued to stare at Kuratsuchi, who sighed in turn. Why am I the one who always gets stuck with the silent types? They are never any fun to mess with. Do not worry, IWA nin, this is all over. Ninpo, insect sphere. Kuratsuchi blinked in confusion, but then the lighting around her started to dim. Looking up, the IWA Kunoichi saw a large sphere of beetles closing in on her completely. Shino watched as she was encased by the beetles. He left on the ground the moment before she kicked him away. Shino waited for his beetles to finish the job, lowering his arms and waiting. That was when there was red glow of a human silhouette under the black mass of chakra-eating insects. Shino moved to reinforce the sphere just in case, but it was too late. Yotan, eruption! Kuratsuchi bellowed from under the beetles angrily because this was the second time she found herself under Shino's bugs. The beetles started to launch off of the Iwagakure Kunoichi, each covered by small globs of lava, making them deadly projectiles. Shino did his best to avoid the flaming insects, however, he was caught a few times from the loose hanging clothing on his body. Kuratsuchi, who was now free, looked absolutely livid with steam coming from her shoulders from her last technique, which only added on to the any visage. Okay, now I am really pissed, Aburame. It is time to finish you off, so I can get away from all these damn bugs. Shino did not even notice Kuratsuchi preparing another jutsu. He was so preoccupied with dodging his insects-turned missiles. the numbers obviously coming back to bite him. Water release, water trumpet. Kuratsuchi gathered up water in her mouth and using her hand to shape the water jet, giving it the appearance of a trumpet, shot it towards Shino. Shino looked up at the last moment to see the powerful jet slam into his chest and blast him into a thick oak tree. The pressure continued, pinning him to the tree, his head whiplashing back and slamming into the solid bark, knocking the bug user unconscious. Kuratsuchi searched through Shino's coat and found her desired object, the Heaven Scroll. Kiba, like the rest of his team, was finding he had no luck with the diver helmet wearing Kunoichi from IWA. The Inuzuka heir looked down to see the skin on his knuckles burnt quite badly, which confused him since he hadn't seen a jutsu being used. Kiba had only managed to land a few strikes on the Kunoichi, but they had done minimal to no damage. The ground around them was marked with craters from Kiba's and Akamaru's use of Getsuga, which the Kunoichi avoided each time. Kiba looked over at his Ninken partner to see his white fur covered with dirt and scratches, but nothing too serious. Kiba shook his hands that had a continuous stinging sensation coming from them, which the young Inuzuka couldn't figure out the cause of. Looking back at the foreign Kunoichi, Kiba grinned at her despite the pain he was feeling. "I don't know why you wear that helmet. It hides your pretty little face," Kiba said in what he thought was a smooth tone of voice, stating what he thought to be a fact. Akamaru let out a small groan, not believing his master would actually try to hit on someone in the middle of a battle. Poor little Akamaru. He probably should put Kiba on a leash. The Iwagakure Kunoichi did not show any positive reaction to Kiba's words. As a matter of fact, she showed no reaction. The look on her beautiful face was one of complete and utter boredom. Obviously, Kiba was not providing any kind of excitement for her. "You're not my type. I would say sorry, but I'm really not," she said, getting an angry frown from Kiba as she looked up at the sky and thought. "No, there is nothing important about this mutt. Not like him." The Kunoichi thought with a longing sigh as she remembered the presence Naruto exuded. In that brief moment, she knew the raven-haired son of the Hokage would be someone important. In that brief moment, she knew she had to have him. "What did you say, you bitch? Oh, stupid Kiba. You never call a woman that, ever." The Kunoichi's gray eyes suddenly had a dangerous glint in them as Kiba's words reached her just after she left her inner workings. A murderous black aura surrounded her, and Kiba thought he saw an Oni mask glaring through his soul, but that was just a killer intent illusion. "What did you say, mutt?" Both humans and the Ninken knew that this question was rhetorical, but Kiba couldn't find his tongue to respond. Akamaru slowly backed away and hid inside of a bush to leave his master to the fate he brought upon himself. The air around the Kunoichi started to shimmer before screams of pain echoed out in the woods. The IWA shinobi team all gathered back together in the place where they originally split up Leaf's teammate. None of the shinobi had a mark on them, nor were they even breathing hard. They were just fine. "It looks like your opponents were letdowns as well, huh?" Kuratsuchi asked while twirling the scroll she liberated from Shino, while her teammates nodded their heads to the more confident member of the team. "All right then. Let's go find a spot to camp out for the rest of the day and night. We have plenty of time left. No need to rush." As the IWA team went to find a suitable place to camp for the next sun and moon cycle, another presence landed on the floor. It was Kurenai Yuhi, the sensei of Team 8, who had come to collect her unconscious team. The reason was she had seen how a number of large, hungry bears were nearing each of her students. Sure, it would disqualify them, but it was better than them being meals for the animals of the forest. Using a genjutsu to knock out the bears, Kurenai took her team to the hospital for treatment and a rest period. The four-man squad from Kumogakure found themselves in a rather tight situation as they stood surrounded by three different teams. They had found themselves in battle for the better part of half an hour with a team from Amigakure, Takigakure, and Yugakure. And yes, Yugakure is still a village. Deal with it. Each time any of the shinobi from Kumo had a chance to finish off one of the 9 various ninja, they were chased off by another one of the 9 shinobi. Omoi and Karui were clashing with 2 nin from AIM who were using an umbrella blade. Initially they thought their teamwork would win out, but the 2 AIM nin were quite the partnership as well and were holding their own. Samui, who at the start managed to kill one of the AIM shinobi with a sneak attack lightning jutsu, was now facing off with the shinobi team from the hidden waterfall village. Samui's tanto was broken from the water blade technique that the kunoichi from Taki had armed herself with. Samui had managed to fend off the water element using shinobi thanks to her lightning affinity, but the numbers had kept them at a deadlock. Yet, if the fight continued as it was, Samui would surely lose because she was only one person, therefore one source of chakra, while they had three. Yujito was the one having the most trouble, however, because of the odd fighting styles each of the Yugakure shinobi had individually. One of the teens had claws made of metal blades that extended out that were very compatible with his natural quickness. The next was a kunoichi who was wearing a large chakram like a large hoop but with a bladed outside. The third shinobi wielded a serrated scythe that looked more designed to cut than stab. Even if Yujito was the Jinchuriki of the Nibi, these people still defied conventional fighting methods, providing challenges that were foreign to Kumo's Hellcat. Yujito had to use the two tails chakra to lengthen her nails into claws of her own to combat the metal claws of the Yugakure shinobi. The few kunai she had tried to use were not long enough to keep up with the eccentric combat she found herself in. Yujito moved to the side, avoiding a slash from the claw-wielding ninja, which she responded to with a swipe of her own, which he blocked with his overhand. Yujito was forced to backflip away before the chakram-wielding kunoichi bisected her at the stomach. Yujito's slitted eyes narrowed at the two shinobi, focusing on trying to find flaws. It was this focus that left the Kumo Jinchuriki open to an attack. "Kitten, there's one behind you." The Nibi's alarmed shout broke Yujito from her planning. Realizing what was about to happen, she braced herself for the hurt. The Nibi too was trying to recall seeing such fighting styles and slacked on sensing the area around her container. Samui also shouted out a warning, but Yujito only heard Nibi's warning. Samui's rare voice raising got the attention of Karui and Omoi, who looked at Yujito with horrified and startled expressions, seeing what Samui was seeing. The two shinobi from Yugakure shared a glance and a smug grin, seeing as they were about to take one of the pesky Kumo nin out. "Finally, I will get to sacrifice someone to Jashin-sama," the black-haired boy shouted with an insane glee, swinging his scythe down on Yujito's exposed back with his tongue hanging from the side of his mouth and eyes bright with an insane mirth. Clang! The Jashinist's eyes widened when he saw his single scythe blade being held at bay by a blade that was black, white, and gray. The teen looked down the blade to see a black-haired shinobi from the hidden leaf was the one who saved Yujito. The sound of metal hitting metal stopped all the fighting going on. Each and every shinobi recognized who Naruto was thanks to Kabuto's information back before the first stage. Yujito and the Kumo nin were both shocked and immensely relieved by Naruto's timely intervention. "And Naruto?" Yujito whispered out, trying to validate what she was seeing as real. Naruto, who was still holding off the scythe with Twilight, without any difficulty turned over his shoulder and gave Yujito a small grin and a nod. Then Naruto quickly threw his katana up, bringing the scythe with it, leaving the teen from Yugakure open up to the kick Naruto delivered to the teen. With the catastrophe averted, both sides regrouped, staring at each other intently and some hostility. Well, not Naruto, he was just holding Twilight while staring at the strange chain around the Jashinist's neck. It was a circle with an upside-down triangle inside of it, which got Naruto to make a note to look up that term. "If there is one thing I can't stand, that is weak people. It is even worse when the weak team together to try and attack something they can't fight on their own. It is truly pathetic," Naruto said in a calm voice that only infuriated the minor village, who saw it for what it was, a metaphor for the minor and major hidden villages. The Kumo team looked at Naruto from the corner of their eyes, just in case Naruto tried something against them as well. "That's right, Ningen. There is nothing worse than a coalition of the weak. If anything, they are fun to destroy, and that's all." Naruto mentally nodded in agreement with the tailed beast inside of his mind, since he too shared that sentiment. "You think you are so great just because you are a shinobi of one of those great shinobi villages? There is no difference between your 5 and us 8. One of the Taki shinobi challenged boldly. He was tired of being underestimated simply because he was born in Takigakure instead of somewhere like Kumogakure or Kanahagakure. He knew of the great shinobi like Kakuzu who could fight with someone like the first Hokage had come from his village. Yet here was a leaf runt talking trash about his home, and it was simply unacceptable. He needed to be shown how weak they were. "Oh? You wish of a demonstration then?" Naruto asked, arching the eyebrow that was hidden by his hanging bang. While he was speaking to the 8 minor village, Naruto was motioning the Kumogakure squad to prepare themselves. "Very well, my minor village friends, we shall have a display," Naruto said with no small amount of amusement as he suddenly vanished from the sight of the genin, only Yujito and Samui able to see him. Not even a moment later Naruto was behind of the Jashinist with Twilight ready to strike decisively. And strike decisively Twilight did because it took off the arm the Jashinist was using to wield the scythe. The teen from the village, hidden in hot water, screamed out in pain as his arm fell to the ground with a thud. Now, if he was a good little Jashinist, he would be feeling euphoria instead of pain. Bad Jashinist! Omoi and Karui quickly charged at the two aim shinobi in hopes of catching them off guard, but they were able to block the swords with their umbrella blades because they were the furthest away from the now one-armed shinobi. Samui also followed her teammates by unleashing a lightning jutsu that sped across the forest floor and shocked one of Taki, Nin, who was too busy, gaping at the armless teen from Yugakure. Yujito had taken the opportunity presented and released a ball of flames that engulfed one of the two remaining Taki shinobi, killing the shinobi. Naruto nodded. In that one moment they were able to reduce their numbers 8 to 5. Shock is truly a powerful emotion, Naruto said, moving away from a claw slash from one of the Yugakure shinobi, moving back towards the Samui and Yujito, who were reading for the next exchange. The kunoichi using the chakram was busy trying to bandage the major wound her teammates suffered from Naruto's demonstration. The one responsible merely shook his head because without the mystic palm technique the teen would die from blood loss. Bandages just wouldn't cut it. Naruto glanced to his right and saw Samui was staring at the Taki kunoichi and Yujito was looking at the boy wearing claws. Looks like they have chosen their opponents. Ninpo, raining grass shower. The two Amigakure shinobi threw their umbrellas into the air where they begun to spin like a top. Picking up speed, the umbrellas began to throw off hundreds of little grass senbon that all came down upon Omoi and Karui, who looked at each other and nodded their heads. Cloud style. Ultimate beheading. The two tan ninja from Kumo shouted in unison as they slashed their swords hundreds of times in the span of the few moments it would have taken for the needles to fall. Soon the needles were all diced and cut into thin sections that fell harmlessly onto the ground. Before the aim Nin could catch their umbrella blades, Omoi and Karui raced forward, delivered a slash to their midsections, cutting them open and making them drop to their knees. Samui had her opponent on the back foot as well, thanks to the elemental advantage lightning had over water. Before, with her two teammates, the kunoichi managed to hold off the lightning user from Kumo, but now, without the numbers, the Taki Nin knew she was in a losing battle. Samui performed a number of hand signs and held her fingers like a sight that took aim at the enemy kunoichi. Lightning release. Shock cannon. A blast of electricity flew from Samui's outstretched hand and coursed through the Taki Nin, making her body spasm before it shut down on her. Yujito was clashing over and over with the shinobi from Yugakure, using her own chakra-infused nails as claws to combat the metal claws of the teen. Taking a slash, Yujito was forced back as the man used his slightly longer arms to keep the Kumo Jinchuriki at bay. The longer the confrontation stretched on, the more irritated Yujito was getting. Having enough of the game of cat and mouse, Yujito channeled some of the Nibi's chakra into her legs and vanished from the man's sight. Reappearing behind Yujito, clawed up his back and neck, cutting his skin deep before slamming her heel into the back of his head. The Kumo team regrouped and looked over to where Naruto was, only to find the other two shinobi from Yugakure lying on top each other, one dead and the other unconscious with an earth scroll sitting on top of the bodies. Samui looked at her teammates and shrugged, since it saved them some work. Cool.